Today we're talking with Lester Haycock from High Performer Building, an Auckland-based company that he runs with his son Tim, and they present a suite of premium building solutions that deliver true value for money. You can check them out at highperformer.co.nz. Now, really great to talk with you this morning, Lester. What inspired the creation and what sets it apart, let's say, from traditional building methods?
Yes, well, good morning, Peter. The interesting thing, I've been marketing building products since 1987, and I tried to retire, but about 15 years ago, I started to get itchy feet and think there's something going wrong in this industry. So in 2015, we created High Performer Building because we could see the cost of construction climbing, the industry was getting controlled by monopolies, and my grandkids were never going to be able to afford a house. So we looked at the traditional form of construction, which is typical studs and nogs and plasterboard and everything else. And we started to look, there's got to be a better way of doing it. So I remember hearing a great speech years ago that said, if you want to make change, you add the new to the old and change will evolve. So we started looking at what's the better, and the J-frame, which is from J&L, is a game changer. The beautiful thing about that, it doesn't need any straightening. It's strong, it's true, and there's a lot of benefits. So we started to think about how could we add other things to the J-frame to make a high-performing structure without reinventing the industry. So it was quite exciting, actually, Peter. So we took off the J-frame, and we realised that we didn't need any nogs with J-frame because a nog doesn't do anything but keep your stud straight.
Yep.
So if your stud's already straight, why would you have a nog? And by reducing the nogs, we started to reduce the thermal load, which is your cold air coming through the frame into the house, which is a big plus. So that was number one thing. And then we started looking at, well, wait a minute, how can we insulate a frame with something that's not going to sag or compress? So we started thinking, well, we need to have a insulation which is recyclable, non-compressible and friction fit. And we found a magnificent product in New Zealand called Mammoth, which is using 15,600 recycled plastic bottles every 100 square metres. So we popped those into the frames, and then we realised, well, we need to brace the frame now, and we're the only country in the world that uses plasterboard to brace a frame. So we looked at doing what the rest of the world does and using a rigid air barrier. But we didn't want to use an ordinary rigid air barrier. We wanted to see what we could do from a recycling, sustainable, perfect perspective. And so we started using SafeBoard, which is made out of thousands, about 550 recycled Tetra Paks or milk cartons. So we're starting to build a frame now, which still looks like a timber frame, but it's got completely different ingredients. And that's delivering a very, very sustainable and an amazing system. So we went on from there and realised, crikey, what else do we look at? We need to reduce the waste on construction. We need to have better thermal control of our frames, and we need to produce a product. So the Jane frame was an absolute game changer. And shortly we'll talk about some of the things we learned overseas, where 85% of our Kiwis very shortly are going to be living in terrace houses, 2 levels or 3 levels. We have to start thinking, well, how do we actually build sustainable, less cost, less waste, and a high-performing structure. So it all started with the J-frame.
Certainly
it's been quite an amazing story, Pete.
Certainly within the industry, if we're talking about high performance, we often end up talking about passive house. So can you tell us about the passive house clever build system and how J-frame is key in that system? Yep.
So a passive house, for those listening, it doesn't really understand. If you watch Grand Designs and things like that, you see houses, but they call that need to be airtight. An airtight house has to be pressurised, and no air can escape through the frame, through the windows, or through anything. And so when you create an ambient temperature in a house, whether it's in the winter or in the summer, you don't want to get that temperature to escape. So you insulate the house, and then you make it completely passive by making it airtight. And so then you need mechanical ventilation, which we can talk about later. But the exciting thing is we would be able to use J-frame, and then we line it with the SafeBoard on the outside to get our bracing. And then we insulate the whole frame with the Mammoth, the recycled bottles. And then on the inside of the frame, which is quite different, we put a very thin layer of the SafeBoard recycled Tetra Paks on the inside of the frame, and we have a completely airtight frame. We use special little tapes to make sure no air gets out. And so that starts the first process. Now, if you've got a building that's sort of below Hamilton, you want a higher R rating, we then take a batten and we put it on the inside of the frame of the house, and then we put all the services in there. So we haven't interrupted the actual frame from being airtight. And then we put extra insulation on the inside of that, and then you can put your plasterboard or whatever lining on that. We end up with a 90mm frame, which is then converted to a 135mm frame with the internal batten, and we end up with an R rating of R3.45. So it's actually a game changer, but it couldn't be done without J-frame. It couldn't be done without a insulation that won't compress or sag or sink, and it couldn't be done without recycled fadeboard. So it's been quite an amazing journey, and we're just launching that right now, and we've had tremendous industry interest in the whole system, Peter.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And I think, there's a lot of detail in what you're talking about, and I think it's worth checking it out online. So I'd suggest that people go and have a look at High Performer Building, and you'll find it at highperformer.co.nz. Inspirational talking with you this morning. Really appreciate your time. And again, folks, check them out, highperformer.co.nz.